fellow was Johnny Mitchell. He was tiny and he always wore a trilby pulled down. And he had, whether it was an air lip or what, but when he spoke, he was short-tongued or something. When he stopped me when I was coming from school, he used to say, "Come here, Mitty." "Come here, Missy," he was supposed to be saying, "and fetch me 5 tar cigarettes." And my mother used to get so cross. Till in the end, she did come down and stop him. She says, "She's not to come down for cigarettes for you. No way." And he was a peculiar little fella. And lunchtime as well, because we lived at the Jefferson, and he used to run home from school, and then at tea time I used to try and dodge him. I told that conservation officer when he said, "How long have you lived in village?" I says, "I was born in village." I says, 87 years. He says, "You're not 87. I says, "I'm 87. I says, "If I weather it well November, I shall be 88. And so he says, "You never are." And so I says, "Well, all right then." I said, "Do you want to see my birth certificate?" And so he says, "No, we won't bother today." And then he said, "Who did this belong to? The back and the trees and that?" I says, "Well, it must have belonged to council." I says, "The council bought it. They bought it off Miss Thieker, Rosie Thieker, that lived in who's its house? That old vicarage." Yeah. And we used to think she was a witch. She was a nice person, but she was strange. And she used to give me all sorts of fancy little buttons and that for me doll frocks and things like that. Anyway, she said, he said, "Well, how long ago will that be?" I says, "Well, I can't remember." But I said, "I know I was going to school and that was all an orchard. That's why it's called the orchard. And there used to be a white house there at the end, Jack Laley's. And they had a business in Fulford. And David went to school with me. And he had a club foot or a short leg or something. And by Jove, he did used to fight and kick anybody with it. He was terrible. He went to live in Pickering. I think he was married in over at Pickering. And I've never heard no more about him. Anyway, he said, "Oh, well, it must be the council then." He says, "I can go back through all the books." I says, "Yes, but," I says, "that was when I went to school here." I said, "It would be 8 or 9 year old I would be." And so I said, "Maybe 10, because I was 10 when we came to live up at the Jefferson, from down the lane where Norman Todd lived, at the crossing house there. I was born down there. And when my parents came to Thorganby, they lived up at the Ings Lane end, where you go down to the bird thing. That's where they came to live in the February, and I was born in the November 1927. And so I said to him, I said, "I know there was a hedgerow all the way along there." I says, "And if you want to know how I come to know that, because Miss Thieker stopped me one day and said, 'Go and ask Mummy if you can have a basket. I've got some apples and pears for you.' And so I ran home, and Mum says, 'Oh, Lord, not some more.' And so she says, 'Here you are.' So she gave me a basket, and don't play about, she says. So I came back down with it, and there was someone cutting the hedge for her down there. And Mother said to me, 'Was there any other school children with you? Any from school? Anybody else there?' I says, 'No, but a fancy man was there cutting hedge.' My mother was so cross with me. I had to go to bed early for saying it. Because you see, when we lived at the Jefferson, we hadn't to repeat anything that we heard anyone saying. That was a strict thing with Mum and Dad, because we were never allowed where bar was or anything like that. And and where I'd got Fancy Man from, I didn't know what I was talking about. And Mother says, you don't say things like that. But she had this gentleman come on a bike, it appears, and they used to stay overnight sometimes, and they used to say it was her Fancy Man. So that's how I got. I've never forgot it, you know. It stuck in my mind. Quite a long time did that. Because I was pulled over at road, by Jove. I was. Because, you know, a bar in a country pub, it isn't for where children should. Because, I mean, farm lads and that, they used to get it talking and use bad language, things like that. There was a bar in the village hall, but you see, before it was the institute. That was where the billiards and things were. Because, we had a clock that my brother won with billiards, and he brought it to my mum. Oh, she was that pleased with this little clock, and do you know, it went for years and years. And he won this with playing billiards. And then there was the village hall. It was made out of a cow shed there, but and it was nice. Sir John Eastwood did that for us, and the bar was all made with bark off a tree. And and then there was such a going on, health and safety lot. There was all these things would, tree beetles and things would come out of the bark, and it wasn't healthy and it had to be knocked down. And then the roof was going and that, and then they got this new one. But, oh dear. It's called the Village Institute, and that was sold, and the money went into this charity thing that's been in the village, like the old school and the Poor Acres land and that. I'm a bit cross about that, about finishing off with this here money for the pensioners. Not because I want the money, because I don't, but I'd like to know what they're going to do with it. Sir John Dunnington-Jefferson left that money for the pensioners of the village. But there's been a bit of a going on. I don't know much about it, but there was quite a few people, not village people, people that have come in, imports as I call it. They didn't like Sir John Dunnington-Jefferson. He was a gentleman. He really was. It didn't matter when they lived up at the Priory, and he used to go to Beverley. I don't know what he was on, something for East Yorkshire County Council or something. And MacFarlane used to take him in he had a maroon car by, it was a beautiful car thing. And he used to wave his hand if he saw you when he was going to Beverley and say, Sir John G.J. has gone to Beverley, he's waved to me today and all that. And it was for the village people. Well, then you see, when he died, his son Mervyn got his title, and it went down, did his knighthood, to his son. Well, he died a couple of years or 3 years ago now. And I thought then, now I wonder what's going to happen to that charity money. Because I didn't know whether Sir Mervyn had a son or he had two daughters. I know he had two children, but I don't know. But he was a nice chap. And but Sir John, he looked to everybody, you know, that was in the village. He was for the village people. But now there's nothing like that, you know. There's nobody. I have a lovely letter. I can just get it. I know it is. That was when my father died. Wasn't that a lovely letter? I I thought the world of that. And I know I showed it to my brother, and he says, well, isn't that wonderful? Showed it to my sister. She says, don't you think he remembered there was a daughter and a son as well? I says, yes, he did. But I said, he chose me to write. And I thought, you know, they wouldn't bother today. Handwritten. I liked him. Well, I liked her as well. I know they didn't like her, a lot of them, when Sir John died and she had that memorial put up in the church, a thing of him. And she wanted a key for the church so she could go in to put a posy when it was birthday or wedding anniversary or whatever. I'm going to keep that forever. And she was wanting this key, and they'd had a church meeting, and Sue Atkinson said to me one day when I used to go to look after Catherine, she said, oh, I must go to Susan Dudley Smith's. She said, there's was a meeting last night, she says, and Lady Dunnington-Jefferson's wanting a key to get into the church. She says, there's one or two of them don't want her to have one. What do you think? I said, it's nothing to do with me, but I says, and so I says, why can't she have a key? You know, anyway, she did get a key in the end. When we were at the Jefferson, we hadn't electric. We had those lamps with they had mantles on, and you had to pump them up. And they heated the rooms as well. And bad, did we miss them when the electric came. There was no heat coming from them. And so this man, the conservation man, said he's going to look through all his papers. He says, it'll be there. I says, well, it was the orchard. And I said, they must have bought it to put the 4 bungalows on it. And I do remember when Les Patrick was the chairman of the parish council, he came to the Jefferson one night and asked to see me dad. And Father went to him and he said, well, I'll tell you what I've come for, Mr. Darley. He says, for the parish council. He says, we're wanting to build some bungalows on the orchard of the old vicarage. And he said, we shan't get it passed if we don't get enough people that'll say they would have one. And so my dad said, well, I really don't want a bungalow yet. And so he said, well, can I put your name down? Just, you know, just for another name. Oh, go on, my dad says, it might help somebody someday. Well, he didn't think I was going to land into one. But it was no good me staying in a cottage. It was 3 bedrooms. Too much for me after he died. And I was working full time, you know, and it was getting over much. So I didn't tell anybody, but I wrote myself to there, and it was in the November when I got the keys. I wouldn't go back into cottage now. Well, this furniture was all my mum's. Apart, I bought the new suite because I couldn't move the one I had, too heavy, and that was my grandpa's writing table. I won't part with it. Dad was a gamekeeper, and he used to train gun dogs to my dad before we ever came up to the pub. But then he was still gamekeepering when we came up to the Jefferson. And so, but he didn't train gun dogs then because we had kennels down at the railway crossing there. Somebody had got a golden retriever, and Father said, well, it hasn't been trained or something. And he said, I wouldn't take that dog on a lead. He says, they can't make anything of it. And Dad says, well, it hasn't been trained, that's why. He said, it's a gun dog. It's a shooting dog, is that? Oh, well, he says, you could make the better of them. I've done that before. My dad says, well, you're a very clever fella. And he argued with me dad over something. And so father said to him, he says, well, you don't know my background, but he says, I have trained at least 20 gun dogs for gentry who come shooting to the estate and that. And he did do. And they used to bring the dogs, and my dad trained them for so many weeks. And then they went back. And I know when our doctor, father had a slight heart attack when we were in the cottage, and John McHenry was our doctor then. And he used to talk cricket and that with me dad. And he came one day and I was doing some baking. So he says, what's that in there? When he walked in, I says, what have you come for? And so he says, I just want to see father. Where is he? I says, he's in the room watching cricket. I says, you can get in there if you can get in without smoke, Bruno pipes, tobacco. And so, because I says he'll be smoking as well. Anyway, he said, what's that? What is that? I says, it's a plum pie. It's got Victoria plums in, and I says, we have it with custard as a sweet. He says, I'll take it home with me. And you know he did do. And so what he came for, he'd got a retriever dog. First dog he'd ever had, apart from corgis or something he'd had, house dogs. And he wanted me dad to take him down the lane near the pub to go and whistle it back and do it, just start to train him. Well, he used to come when it was his day off. Nearly every week they used to go down into things, they used to go all over. And father came back one day, he says, do you know? He says, as long as he has a puff of wind in him, he will never train a dog. And I told him one time, when I had to see him, and he says, how's father? I says, he's all right. He says, has he got any dogs in now? I says, no. I says, how are you doing with yours? Oh, not so bad. He says, well, I says, do you know what he said? And I told him, I says, father said, as long as you have a puff of wind in you, you will never train a dog. Well, he laughed and laughed, and he's never forgot it, you know. He was no good. My dad said he'll never train a dog. Oh, that dog, little dog of Joy's, you know. He's a little cairn terrier. He's a lovely little fella. Take him down the lane, because she can't take him for a long walk now. And I took him down the lane. When we went into the Jefferson at 1937, down the cellar was 3. And mother gave my brother one, she gave my sister one. They both brought theirs, and that was mine, was that one. And I had it made into a lamp. They're just a little brass tap, and I clean that every time I clean my brass. And it's a lovely lamp. I'll put it on just to